We all know that Knives Out slaps, but can its sequel measure up? Today we're gonna comb through every scene like we're Benoit Blanc and show you what you might have missed in Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery.
Something is afoot.
Miles' obsession with the Mona Lisa is one of the cornerstones of Glass Onion. It's a perfect manifestation of his vanity and is a centerpiece of the gut-busting finale. When he introduces the painting to the cast, he goes on about how Leonardo da Vinci pioneered a unique brushstroke technique that prevented lines from appearing on the painting, resulting in a work that looks different from every angle, stating, "It's never what you thought you were looking at." This is a clear metaphor for the mystery genre as a whole, but it's also representative of how Rian Johnson makes his movies. Be it Knives Out or The Last Jedi, his films practically switch genres halfway through. Oh, I just mentioned The Last Jedi. Quick, time for something educational.
Perfect, don't forget.
Alright, yeah, you definitely saw Benoit Blanc playing Among Us in the bathtub with his friends over Skype. And you either laughed because it's Among Us, cringed because it's Among Us, teared up a little bit because that scene gave you some very uncomfortable flashbacks to times best forgotten, or sobbed because it was a reminder that we recently lost two legends that were playing against him, Stephen Sondheim and Angela Lansbury. What a lovely bittersweet pair of cameos that was. But did you see that Blanc's AMOGUS was the white one, just like his last name? Personally, I prefer turquoise, but if my last name was a color, I'd probably have a different point of view. Blanc's skill at Among Us rings true with how he feels about the game of Clue. He's awful at it and kind of hates it. My dear detective, that's what we call a skill issue. Despite the name of the movie, Glass Onion isn't even the first Beatles song you hear, although we'll get to it later, trust me. When we arrive at the island, Miles plays Blackbird on the very guitar Paul McCartney wrote it on, and he just drops it in the sand. You know, considering how much he values the Mona Lisa. You'd think he'd hold the other cultural artifacts in his possession in a similar regard. Then again, he is an idiot. What's ironic, and makes Miles even more of an idiot, is that Blackbird was actually written by Paul McCartney as a means of speaking to the racial strife that engulfed America in the 1960s. He's described the song as speaking specifically to a black woman, which is hilarious considered he screwed over and murdered Andy Brand. It's astounding that he can possess such an acute understanding of Da Vinci's brushstroke technique employed in the Mona Lisa, but not understand the meaning of Blackbird.
It makes no damn sense.
Then again, he is an idiot. You might think the tattoos Dave was sporting in Glass Onion was the work of the makeup department, but no, they're his own ink on full display for our pleasure. While he's got ink all over, a few that stuck out were symbols on his knuckles. The first was a symbol for Superman, which would fit naturally with Duke's macho demeanor. But did you know that he actually worked alongside Tom Welling's Superman on Smallville? According to an interview Welling did with the podcast Talkville, Bautista played a man-eating humanoid alien named Aldar in season 1. Tom Welling described Bautista as the only person in my life who's ever picked me up over his head and held me. That's so sweet. Alright, I know we're all excited to see The Rock duke it out with Cavill's Superman, but now I want to see Bautista get a round 2 with the Man of Steel. Anyone else think he'd make a good Lobo? Come on!
I see where you're going with this.
So, you thought we were done poring over Dave Bautista's body art? Well, you'd be wrong. He also had the Aquaman logo on the same hand as the Superman symbol. This isn't leading to an overlooked cameo in Aquaman, but did you know that Jason Momoa and Dave Bautista are actually great friends in real life? They met at a Comic-Con and absolutely geeked out meeting one another. Momoa's a massive WWE fan, so it makes sense that he'd be a fan of Bautista's career. They were even both lifeguards growing up. Isn't that cute? While we're all waiting to see what their buddy cop movie would look like, I can't help but wonder what the Baywatch reboot would have been like if they were the leads instead of Dwayne Johnson and Zac Efron. I guess I'll just be daydreaming by my lonesome. The Marvel references keep coming in one form or another. Remember Jeremy Renner's hot sauce and how it came back around to help fake Helen's death and allow Benoit Blanc to cry on cue? That's a reference to that one time Jeremy Renner went blind in one eye while he was on Hot Ones. Personally, I thought it was going to lead into a bit involving free guac. Not sure what was up with the Jared Leto kombucha though. It's probably a reference to him being a cult leader with the kombucha being his Kool-Aid. It's increasingly entertaining to see what Benoit Blanc has zero patience for, despite, you know, being a detective.
I'm very bad at dumb things. Ticking boxes, running around, searching all the rooms.
We've mentioned his distaste for mystery games like Clue and Among Us, but let's go back to the first movie where he grilled Ana de Armas's character about the novel Gravity's Rainbow by reclusive author Thomas Pynchon. While Armas admitted she knew of the book, she hadn't read it, to which Blanc quips back that
Nobody has.
Nobody except the women's tennis goat Serena Williams, that is. In Miles's gym, you can see an LCD screen with Serena Williams reading Gravity's Rainbow. You might think at first that this is just a weird screensaver befitting an eccentric billionaire like Miles Brom, but nope. Miss Williams was just reading the novel while waiting to see if anyone present was going to work out or not. Just goes to show that the best athletes train their body and mind. The first movie had a lot of knives in it, as one might imagine given the title. Ultimately, the title's purpose came into play when Benoit Blanc described the Thromby family as a pack of vultures, knives out, and beaks bloody.
What's that supposed to mean?
But there's also Harlan's musing about how Ransom plays life like a game without consequences, until he can't see the difference between stage prop and a real knife, which ultimately came back to bite Ransom in the ass when he tried to murder Marta, only to fail because he grabbed a prop knife. This prop knife actually makes a small appearance in Glass Onion, as we can see Peg holding a pop-up knife as she boards the boat to Miles's island. Later on, when the lights go dark, we can see a knife block in the kitchen with the biggest knife missing. This was clearly a red herring meant to mislead the audience, thinking a knife would end up playing a role as the murder weapon. Hopefully when Glass Onion drops on Netflix, we can comb the movie to see where else it shows up in the movie, if at all. Cue the phrasing meme from Archer. Phrasing. Did you know that Joseph Gordon-Levitt has cameoed in every single one of Rian Johnson films? From Looper to The Last Jedi, JGL has a habit of just showing up. He was even in Knives Out, doing voice work in the murder mystery that Marta's sister was watching. But where was he in Glass Onion? Well, you know the tone that plays every hour on the hour? Yep. That's the one. Easily Joseph Gordon-Levitt's most covert cameo yet. Rian Johnson mentioned in an interview with Mashable that JGL said the word dong, and the team turned that audio clip into a musical note. I'm not even sure if Benoit Blanc could have sussed that one out. Given the title of the movie, it's natural that the end credits would play the classic White Album track of the same name. Considering how Rian Johnson deliberately placed the other tracks throughout the movie, surely the end credits would have the most poignant message of all. Well, that's a bit tricky. John Lennon wrote the lyrics to Glass Onion to deliberately confuse people who read too much into the lyrical meanings of Beatles songs. Those kinds of people annoyed him, so he decided to deliberately confuse the reader. Ironically, this lines up perfectly with the film, as any good mystery should try to deliberately mislead the viewer. Although, given the intent behind the lyrics, it's a perfect fit for the movie. Miles Brom is, as we've thoroughly established, an idiot that's constantly trying to make himself seem smarter than he actually is, which one could see as how John Lennon viewed the people who tried to overzealously interpret his work.
This is getting serious.
This does beg one final question. Is the inclusion of the song in that manner a disrespect to the artist's intent? Or am I becoming exactly what John Lennon hated? Sound off in the comments below. In one of several layers of biting social commentary, Glass Onion takes place during the 2020 COVID lockdown, and while the plot of the movie doesn't revolve around the then ongoing pandemic, Rian Johnson still manages to use the time frame to sprinkle in some subtle characterization. When the guests of the Glass Onion getaway get together in a group for the first time, we see who does and does not give a rat's about personal hygiene. Detective Blanc and Lionel clearly care about properly protecting their faces and both practice social distancing. Claire DeBella, aka Agatha, has a mask that doesn't cover her nose, a telltale sign that she's a big fat phony. I'm just joking about the fat part. Kathryn Hahn, you look lovely and I would love to take you to dinner. Birdie, the vainest of the whole group, and boy does that say something, wears a fishnet mask that doesn't even block the transmission of airborne particles. I feel like that's worse than no mask at all. It's clear from her introduction that Birdie doesn't exactly possess any social grace. The lady compared herself to Harriet Tubman while on Oprah, and there's no way to make that look good, even if it's supposedly meant in spirit. Conversations with her social media manager Peg heavily implied that her tribute to Beyonce was blackface. I want to say that her still having a Twitter account is a small miracle, but we know more people have gotten away with worse on that platform. Remember how messed up her mask was? That might be a nod to a scandal involving Lana Del Ray in 2020, where she'd wear an equally useless but admittedly fashionable fishnet mask while meeting friends. Her fans absolutely roasted her on Instagram, and by that I mean they politely pleaded with her to reconsider her actions. Still, I guess it's better than not wearing one at all, like Dave and Whiskey. Miles has a habit of faxing Lionel crazy ideas in the hopes that he'll science the shit out of them and proceed to monetize them. One of those crazy ideas is AI in dogs equals discourse, which, to be fair, both of those things generate discourse on their own, so it's not his dumbest idea, yet. This is clearly acknowledging the dog-shaped drones that are becoming more and more popular as time goes on. At first, they were just used to help deliver Amazon packages, but now we're getting to the point where they're being used to help the cops deliver justice. Yeah, I can't imagine why Miles thought that would generate discourse. We've talked about how the Marvel actors in this series all end up playing characters that you'd have a hard time calling heroic.
Yes.
It all started with Chris Evans departing from the moral high ground of Captain America, and now we've got Drax and Bruce Banner forming their own not-so-super team with Agatha. The Marvel reference is pretty apparent when Duke shouts, "Disruptors, assemble!" But it's interesting to think of how the characters of the MCU actors in Glass Onion parallel and deviate from their more family-friendly counterparts. We've mentioned how Agatha and Claire both put on a nice face, only to be revealed as wolves in sheep's clothing. Dave and Drax could both be classified as himbos, although one's a member of the manosphere while the other respects women of all shapes and sizes. Although before his untimely demise, Dave proved himself to be shockingly articulate when calling Andy the biggest loser out of all the Disruptors, and yet he was the only one on the island who died, so you could argue that he was the biggest loser, or the biggest winner, since he doesn't have to live with his guilt. Both Knives Out and its sequel share a common theme of privileged jerks leeching off the hard work of a common benefactor. In the first movie, it was Harlan Thrombey's success as a novelist. In Glass Onion, the Disruptors gained their success off of Miles stealing Andy's ideas, but credit where credit is due, compared to the Thrombey family, the rest of the Disruptors actually had careers before Miles effectively bankrolled them. That knowledge, coupled with everyone smashing Miles' stuff and agreeing to speak out against him in court, definitely makes these privileged more likable than the Thrombeys, except Duke. That guy was an incel. Me no likey. Benoit Blanc makes it very clear to Helen that he's no Batman, and that he can't act outside the law when exposing the crimes of Miles Brom. This is funny considering that Daniel Craig's James Bond movies took a heavy influence from Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins, following the gritty reboot trend that took the world by storm, love it or hate it. It definitely worked out for his Bond films, and it just goes to show that when deciding on the tone of your film, you've got to keep in mind what the tone of the world is. Anyone else notice that the insignia of the Glass Onion looks a lot like the Greek Omega symbol? It's pretty fitting on a number of levels. The AI that runs the compound, that I remind you that Miles stole from Andy, is called Alpha, and considering that's where the story of the Disruptors started and the Glass Onion is where it ended, it's pretty poetic. Although, given Miles' obvious infatuation with Fight Club, maybe he wants to be an alpha male, but cooler. So he invented the term Omega Male. It's a bit fan-fiction-y, but considering this movie took place before Sigma Male entered the popular lexicon, it would definitely be in character. When we flash back to the initial meeting of the Disruptors in the Glass Onion bar, we can hear David Bowie's Starman playing in the background. At first glance, you could take this as Rian Johnson putting more of his favorite music in the movie, as many directors are to do. But if you look into the meaning behind the lyrics of Starman, you'll realize there's more to it. David Bowie once had a conversation with writer William S. Burroughs, where he mentioned that he was always trying to reach the young people with his music. He often received fan mail from his younger fans that, as he put it, were endowed with a forward-looking perspective that lent itself well to what he was trying to do in his music. Considering that the main goal of the Disruptors was to challenge the system and ultimately introduce a clean, renewable energy source to the world, it definitely fits the mood of that scene. Although, I feel like Bowie would want people to properly test their highly volatile energy sources before shipping them worldwide, so plus one theoretical point to Bowie on that one. The main room of the Glass Onion is a production design masterpiece, a tribute to opulence that oozes Miles' ego from every angle. The biggest one is the massive portrait of his shirtless self that's in the background more often than the Mona Lisa. It's a clear homage to his role in Fight Club, which is fitting since his character in that accidentally became a male role model for years to come, which is absolutely not the point of the film, kids. And considering that Miles Brom is an obvious pastiche of Elon Musk, a grade A idiot that should not be idolized but somehow still is, you can see how it fits so well. The first Knives Out ended with a racist family losing an inheritance they didn't deserve. How do you top that? By smashing the possessions of a billionaire who stole the foundation of his own legacy and even get his closest friends in on the vandalism. And then you take it one step further and just blow up his house and ruin his reputation. Rian Johnson clearly has a thing for sticking it to the rich, as evident in the Knives Out series and The Last Jedi. Seriously, how can you hate the Canto bite scene? That part just gets better with age.
I do not know.
And before you can rage quit the video and roast me in the comments, joke's on you, the video's over. I guess you can still roast me in the comments, but hey, that's on you.
Go away!
And that's a wrap, at least until this movie hits Netflix on December 23rd. Then I'm sure we'll be back for another round of Easter egg hunting. Hunting for Easter eggs in December. Jesus was born on Christmas, Easter is a celebration of his resurrection 3 days after his death. What's Rian Johnson trying to say here? Let's forget about it for now. Was there anything you caught in Glass Onion we didn't? Let us know in the comments below.